And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Every type of forest is different, and there's no commonly accepted definition of old-growth forest. Characteristics of old growth can include tree species, surrounding forest structure, and ecological function. While these characteristics vary according to location and species, old-growth forests tend to have more diversity of plant and animal life than younger forests. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
Bill Hayes has lived in the Northwest virtually all his life. He loves the area, and there's very little he loves more about the Northwest than its forests. The 40-year-old schoolteacher spends as much time as he can rummaging around the woods. Always on the lookout, he pokes into the innumerable nooks and crannies of the temperate rainforest, examining closely what he discovers there, plants and animals alike. And Bill Hayes discovers a great deal on his forays. Over the years, he's learned to see things that for many of us go mostly unnoticed. His knowledge encompasses not only that which is readily apparent, but also the less tangible, such as the myriad of relationships that exist among the creatures and plants that make up the forest. Hayes does most of his exploring in the so-called old-growth forests, that is, the forests that have so far escaped the ravages of man and are as nature created them.
I don't like the word old growth, by the way. I like the term more family forest, because you have very young trees. You have seedlings, you have medium-sized trees, you have old trees, you have decadent trees. So it's really a family forest.
Hayes loves the old-growth forests for what they have that younger forests don't have. A wide spectrum of life, from the newly growing to the mature to the dying and dead.
And these components you don't find in very young forests. And they're very important, these structures, because up to 80 to 90% of our vertebrates, our birds and mammals, need these structural components in a forest.
Hayes says there are dozens of plant-animal relationships in the old-growth forests that just don't exist in newer forests. Some are complex, others are simple, but all are important.
Let me give you one example. Pileated woodpeckers. Now, they need trees that are about 24 inches in diameter. Old, dead, decadent, deformed trees. And they come into the forest. You can see right up here. There's some holes in the trees. Well, that was made by a woodpecker. But they're making cavities for about 30 other species of our resident birds, chickadees, kinglets.
Where they nest.
Where they nest, that's right. And not only that, but pileated woodpeckers will eat, for example, many thousands of insects each year within the forest. So they have a very unique role to play in the forest ecologically, both for making cavities and focusing in on areas where there are lots of insects that are gathering. They'll focus in on that and eat them.
Hayes says when the old-growth forests are destroyed, the components necessary for the various relationships are also destroyed. The balance of nature is upset, and many animals are adversely affected. Old-growth forests are disappearing in BC, especially along the valley bottoms. Those areas are the easiest to access, and they're the richest, both in timber values and in animal habitat. How much valley bottom old growth is left in the Northwest?
It's hard to say. There's different ecosystem associations. I took my class, or wanted to take my class down and see a spruce ecosystem. That is those giant, big base spruce that were very common not that many years ago. But I went down to the Forest Service and asked, well, could you tell me where there's an old growth spruce ecosystem? And there were none. And I think that's tragic. We're basically eliminating an ecosystem forever because you have to wait 500 to 1,000 years before this system can regenerate. And I don't believe our values are such that we would wait that long.
Bill Hayes is not against logging per se. What he doesn't like about logging in BC is the way it's done, particularly clear cutting, the harvest method of choice in the province. Clear-cutting destroys everything that was there before, and even after the cut blocks have been replanted, the new forest bears very little resemblance to its former self. After an area like this has been clear-cut, crews move in to replant it, replacing the trees that were taken. The thing about this type of reforestation effort is it's creating basically a monoculture forest. The trees that are planted are usually all the same species, they're the same age, with the same genetic characteristics. There's very little variety. What Bill Hayes says is we need that variety, that diversity, in order to gain ecological strength.
I think monoculture forest is definitely the wrong way to go. What happens is that for the first 20 years after clear cut, you'll get a lot of growth. But then what happens is that slowly the trees dominate the canopy, and underneath you closes the canopy. And you create a virtual biological desert underneath there, and you'll even lose your bears. And what has happened, in fact, is bears become a real problem. The black bear population will expand in the clear cut. There's a lot of habitat for them. But then, once the canopy of the trees close, once the light cannot get down to the forest floor,
and the trees are all the same height.
They're all the same height. They're evenly spaced. Then the bears, when they come out in the spring, where they would have a variety of herbs and fresh things to feed on, now have to feed on trees.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thanks for staying with us. Short rotation forestry can be defined as a silviculture practice under which high-density, sustainable plantations of fast-growing tree species produce woody biomass on agricultural land or fertile but degraded forest land. Let us return to the archives as Bill Hayes shares what happens when trees mature.
So just when you start getting habitat that is conducive for pileated woodpeckers and all these other resident species, we're going to cut it down. So basically, you're eliminating their habitat forever.
And Hayes feels the intricacies of the relationships that exist in old-growth forests are such that logging as we know it in BC will not survive without those relationships.
I don't believe that you can grow short rotation young forests over the long term without these animal species. Let me give you an example. One old growth inhabitant is the northern flying squirrel. This little guy lives very high up in the tree, and he will glide down to the base, land on the base of a tree, and then he'll search around the base of the bottom of the tree for mycorrhizal mushrooms within the forest. And then once he's done that, he'll climb up again and then glide down. He has a circular route that he does at night. But they found that this squirrel is very important for distributing these mushroom spores throughout the forest. And we've also found that these mushrooms are very, very important for healthy forests. Because what you do is the mushrooms and the trees, the root systems interpenetrate. So the mushrooms then will take the sugars from the tree, from the process of photosynthesis in the trees, and in exchange the trees will get micronutrients from these mushrooms, which are very vital for the tree. There are approximately 18 different micronutrients which are important: zinc, cobalt, selenium, and the list goes on. And if you don't have these nutrients within the tree, it becomes stressed. It's more susceptible to disease. So basically, by eliminating the squirrel's habitat, you're eliminating the strength of the mycorrhizal relationships within the forest, and you're making the forest more susceptible to disease and predators. And like I say, I don't believe in the long term we can grow forests without having these ecological relationships.
Bill Hayes believes there's a number of things that must happen to save the ecological relationships that exist in old-growth forest. First of all, there must be more research. He gets almost all his information from a few studies that have been done in Washington and Oregon states. He says in BC there's almost no information. Our rate of clear-cutting has far outstripped what we know about its long-term effects.
Wow, it's tremendously complex. That's why I say, like, there's so much to know and there's so much we don't know. I'm in awe of forests. I can go in and maybe I know different mushrooms, but studies have shown, like with Douglas fir, for instance, that there are over 1,000 mushrooms that have mycorrhizal relationships with that one tree. And it's the same with hemlock.
While research is important, Hayes feels it's not enough. He says there must be a change in our logging practices, away from massive clear-cutting to methods such as selective logging, where many trees are left standing, and to long-term harvesting rotations of several hundred years instead of just 80 years. But to achieve that, there has to be a fundamental change in the way we see our forests, so they're valued for more than just giant wood fiber farms.
There's two ways. We're right at a crossroads right now. There's one that says we need more corporate concentration, more monoculture, even stands. Let's just plant the trees and tend them type of thing. But there's another road that is starting to open up. And actually this month, I heard in Tofino that there's the Forest Service was eliminated, and they're starting to have local involvement, people getting together, talking about the forest, about other values than just simply cutting it down.
Above all, Hayes feels the concept of monoculture reforestation must be abandoned. It's a relatively new practice that hasn't been proven through the test of time. But Hayes suspects monoculture forests are a poor substitute for the real thing. The eventual influences of Mother Nature are difficult to foresee, and too often silviculture problems, such as porcupine damage and unwanted brush competition, come into play that weren't predicted.
So what you have to do, you have to have prevention. And the key is diversity, to have a diverse environment. By having diversity, you have checks and balances which can counteract with each other. The more diversity you have, the more checks and balances you have. By going to a monoculture, you eliminate your diversity, which is the basic component of ecological stability. And by going to a monoculture, you lose your stability, you create tremendous stress on your trees, you lose your wildlife, and basically your system is in a continual system of degradation.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Horses and oxen have been used to haul logs since pre-industrial times. Much of it was small-scale harvesting, but it was hard and hazardous work. Unstable and snagged trees, falling branches, and loose material were widowmakers of a rapidly growing but dangerous industry. Let us return to the archives to bring you this story from 1989.
This past spring and summer, a horse logging course was taught through the Northwest Community College in Smithers. The 4-month program was all-encompassing, including horse handling, silviculture, small engine repairs, and how to set up a small business logging contract. Instructor and horse logger Harry Holden says this is an alternative to the more common mechanical logging.
We've been doing it now for a few years, just in small areas, private timber, a little bit of bugwood, making ski trails, in sensitive ground where they didn't want to use cats and chew the ground up. Just in small projects where there's bugwood, instead of falling it and cutting it into blocks and burning it, we've skidded it out and you can sell the logs then.
I guess some people might think that horse logging is something that's dying out, but I get the impression that actually it's on a comeback.
Well, we're hoping it's on a comeback. We're trying to explain it as an alternative in sensitive areas, along creeks, rivers, lakes. It's an alternative to small machinery, which could do root damage, and we feel that horses are quite a bit easier on sites that are sensitive soil or have erosion potential.
But whatever the reason for choosing horse logging, one can't overlook that it's dependent on people and animals getting along. At the beginning of the 4-month program, as the students took their first tentative steps driving the large workhorses, Holden expressed confidence that everyone would come to like the horses.
I think that the people will learn to like the horses the way I do. But I also have some excellent videotapes on horse psychology and handling horses and training horses. So our students seem quite interested in it. And I think the basic way to develop a rapport with them is to like them. They can tell when you like them.
You mentioned something too to the students out there was to stay calm when you're talking to the horses. You don't want to be excited.
No, that's right. The less that you ever yell or sound excited, the calmer they'll be. And because they like you and they like to work with you. You feed them, you rub their shoulders down, you doctor them when they're hurt. So they trust you a lot. So their mood and their feelings is in direct tune with what yours are. And I know that might seem far-fetched, but I'm sure it works. You can see how they work just by voice, and they listen really well.
What about their size? I mean, just on size alone, they're fairly intimidating, but they didn't seem like creatures you had to worry about today, at least.
No, they're very gentle. They, as you can see, like he's really friendly. We've had a little child came up and touched him right underneath his belly and on his back leg at the fall fair, and he just turned around and looked back at it. So they like people, and they never step on you if they could help it. They're really a gentle animal.
But they're big, so I guess you have to be looking out for yourself too, eh?
You do, because when they turn around, they take up quite an area. They're approximately 11 feet long, so you can imagine you have to watch your feet.
So the learning process. Students learning how to handle horses, how to harness them and talk to them, and horses learning the ropes too. In this case, a young horse is harnessed and walked behind a cart to get used to the noise. And after a time, walked in front of the cart, though not hooked up yet, still getting used to sounds now behind him. Later, after months of learning, Holden says the students did come to like the animals and work well with them.
I think a lot of them have enjoyed working with horses. Some of them, like Bob, have worked with horses before, but a lot of them were completely new to it, but they seem to have really enjoyed it.
From the first day through to when the course participants were actually logging, Holden constantly reminded them to talk to the horses.
There's quite a few students. We still have 13 full-time students, so the horses have got to know their voices, and it comforts the horses to know where the students are, the one who's driving them, especially the teamster. He's in total control of the horse, so it's good that they talk to him. It relaxes the horse, and it reassures them to know where their teamster is standing.
What about getting them to work less or more hard, I guess, depending on the circumstance? Can you control the amount of effort that the animal's exerting?
You can control that by the tone of your voice and also by the rein pressure, and they can feel from your rein pressure in your hands and the pull of the load how much they need to do.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Horse logging is many different things for many different people. For those who use draft animals in their day-to-day logging work, it can be a meaningful and rewarding career. For landowners with timber on their land, a harvesting system can extract timber carefully. In this final segment of Open Connection, we discover other reasons why people took this horse logging course.
Case in point, Holden's not satisfied when the large and eager-to-work Major isn't adequately controlled.
Don't let him go that fast, would you? That's up to you how fast he goes.
Well, I was holding him back.
Yeah, just stop him.
My whole body.
Yeah, just stop him, and then tell him to go easy, okay? Here, I'll show you.
Experience shows here when Major can hear the commands and responds without pulling his driver off his feet. Bob Wallman, one of the students who completed the program, worked with horses as a child, but says he wanted to get to know the animals again.
I came from another country, and everything is different, and even the commands are different to the horses, so that's interesting. And then I like to live out here, and I just moved here a couple of years ago. And I used to work in the prairies and all over Canada. And now I would like to stay out here. So, and the main industry is forestry. And I kind of find horse logging kind of suits me better. I don't like big machines. They destroy too much.
So horse logging is something you consider then as a means to earn a living?
Yeah, exactly.
Wallman is enthusiastic about the course and the variety of instruction he and his colleagues received.
Everything was so interesting. Silviculture, and we had a first aid. What else did we have? And everyone knows how to take a power saw apart now. We got that, I think it was a week. And we learned so much. I mean, we could go probably another 4 weeks and learn more. Even the hookups in the bush, like hook up trees with horses, and it is very interesting.
What about the work with the horses themselves? How rewarding has that been?
Absolutely fantastic. I just love horses. And they are some fantastic animals. And they should have a place in the forest industry, I would say.
Well, when I was watching you earlier, it seems like when the horse decides to go, he gets to.
Oh, yeah, better be ready, especially that's Major. He pulls the reins where he wants to go.
So they like to work?
Oh, absolutely. They just have fun working. Seems like it anyway. I mean, you watched it.
So several weeks and a long way from those first steps taken in April, Holden is pleased with the students' progress and their new competence in logging sensitive sites with horses.
So we've seen different kinds of logging situations, from special research programs to select logging to a small clear-cut patch of bugwood. So I think the students have enjoyed it. I know I have. We've covered quite a bit of different ground in a short time.
Just watching the little bit of activity in here, it's apparent that they're learning more than just horse handling. They're trying to, or I guess you're trying to get them to make decisions on how to move best so that you're disturbing soils least and all kinds of things.
Yeah, we've worked on that with our silviculture part of the program. They learned all the theoretical and the proper techniques of selecting diseased or damaged trees and identifying different insect problems. And now we're actually in the bush picking out these trees and selecting the ones that are healthy to leave that can grow some more, or that are possible seed trees.
How about the soils themselves? What once you're done, what have you left behind there?
Well, we've tried to stress a minimum of damage to soils. We had to work on a couple places, one right near the Bulkley River, where they didn't want any soil disturbance at all because of runoff, and that's the reason they're horse logging that particular area of bugwood. And there is a minimum of soil damage, it just barely roils the surface.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.